Oh, good. Cody.
Then we just turn on the camera here.
Yep.
Okay. Do we have to turn on the
I
microphone?
think the microphone is on. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good.
We'll give everyone a couple of minutes to filter in and then we'll get started. But we'll just go on mute until then. Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Would everyone feel comfortable coming on camera? Thank you. Then I think we're waiting on a couple more, but there's no reason we can't get started as folks trickle in. So full disclosure, this is my first time teaching a class at CSU. So thank you all for bearing with me as I learn all of the systems. And I appreciate any feedback you have on what could make this more accessible and what could make your experience, if you're dialing in remote, a little easier. So please don't feel shy about that.
Hi, Sarah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Annie. Is the class in person no longer in 135 Animal Sciences?
No, we are in, where are we?
NESB 217, the conference room.
Yeah, I put it up on the home screen.
217?
218,
218, yeah.
the Swift conference room.
Is this in the Animal Sciences building?
No, it's in the Natural and Environmental Sciences building.
Okay. Should I stay online or should I make my way over to that building?
Whatever your preference. We have 2
Okay.
hours, so if you miss a few on your way over, that's totally fine.
Okay, I'll do that. Sorry for wasting people's time. I'll be there soon.
No worries. All right. Let's get started then. Actually, I'm gonna pull this up so I can make slides here too. And I'm just gonna share my screen and pull up a deck if that works for everyone. This thing. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Oops. And does anyone offhand know the keyboard control for presenter mode on
Maybe the icon next to the one
this
on
one?
the left. The box, yeah.
Look at that. Well, that's close enough. All right. So everyone can see the screen. We can still see you all. Just checking in, everyone is in the right class. This is Voluntary Carbon Markets Quality and Risk Assessment, correct? All right, I'm seeing nods. You're nodding. Excellent. I'm Sarah, she, her. I will be your instructor, and I have my email right here. Again, I'm new to Canvas, so if you want to email me on Outlook, that is much better for getting a response. I wonder if I just press down, or do I scroll through? Okay. So what we're going to do today is intros. We're going to talk a little bit about what we're going to do in this class, and then we're going to dive right into it. So we'll talk a little bit about what carbon management is, what the voluntary carbon market is in service of, and then we'll kind of set the stage for the rest of the class, which will be taking a critical look at assessing risks to enable critical decision making for buyers on the voluntary carbon market. And then we'll just kind of talk through next steps. Any questions about the agenda? No. Okay. All right, so we're going to be an interactive class because you just don't want me to talk at you for 2 hours, and I don't want that either. So if we could just go around and say your name, what is your favorite tree? What are you studying? Why are you taking this class in particular? And is there anything additional that you'd like to share with us? I can go first. I'm Sarah. My favorite tree is the sweet gum tree because I think it has the most beautiful Latin name. I studied biogeography and forest ecology. And I am teaching this class because when I left academia, I didn't know what I could do outside of evolutionary biology. I had no idea how scientists could engage in private industry beyond going into policy or consulting at McKinsey. which were kind of the two options laid out to me. So it's really important to me to kind of talk through ways that applied science can work in private industry. And I hope that you all find this helpful. Do you want to go, Sarah?
Sure. My name is also Sarah. I would say my favorite tree is the willow tree. I just think it has like the nicest branches and leaves and just so pretty how it falls. I am in the PSM, so the Professional Science Masters in Ecosystem Science and Sustainability, focusing on carbon management and sustainable food systems. And I'm taking this class primarily because I want to just focus more into how MRV can be improved and just like based on the reading, seeing how there's a lot of issues with these private companies doing MRV and just all the scandals, I guess. I would like to learn more about that. And
Awesome, thank you. Who is next? Next up on my screen is Nathan.
Sure, I go next. So my name's Nate. I guess favorite tree will be the Douglas fir because we have a lot of them where I'm from in Seattle, and it's also not a fir tree, which is fun. Because scientists bad at naming things apparently. I'm also in the PSM program doing carbon management. As far as why this class, I work at a renewable energy developer, and there's increasing pressure from some of our customers as far as reducing emissions, and some of that may need to be done through carbon offsets. So if we're going down that road, we want to make sure we do it in an appropriate way.
Thank you. Cody.
Hey, Cody Wilkinson. I think my favorite tree I just randomly thought of this really cool tree, but I think it's in Japan, and they have the main stem, and then it grows like a canopy, and then they can grow more trees off of that canopy. And so it's like a super sustainable way to grow trees, and they use that for their building because it's an island and they have to, like, famously Britain cut down all their trees. So Japan didn't do that, but that's one of the things that they used to not cut down all their trees. So I think that's a really cool tree. I'm also in the PSM program as same as Sarah, doing carbon management, and I would have graduated in December, but I tagged along the Karma certificate, so 2 more semesters, and I am taking this class because last year I took carbon finance with Lauren Gifford, and it was a really awesome class. I really love her, and I think carbon finance is essentially the most important aspect of the green transition, which is funding and spreading resources where they need to be and implementing those solutions. But funding is the number one barrier to whether or not a project will happen or not. So carbon finance as a whole, these carbon markets are a really interesting way to go about doing that. So that's why I'm in this class. And another thing, any additional thing, the train front range passenger rail is a project that's maybe happening in Colorado that I think is really cool. And if you don't know about it, you should look it up.
Thank you. Malin, am I saying your name correctly?
Yeah, hi, I'm Malin Houseworth. I'm in the same master's program as Sarah, Nate, and others. I'm focusing on carbon management and sustainable food systems. My favorite tree is the ginkgo tree. I like the shape of their leaves. And then I'm in this class because my internship and just, I guess, my career path has led me to being interested in the carbon markets, and it's just important to me and in general to be educated on it.
Thank you. Ashley?
Hi everybody, my name is Ashley Prentice. My favorite tree is probably an Engelmann spruce tree. I don't live in Fort Collins. I live outside of Gunnison, Colorado, in the southwest area of the state. And so I spend a lot of time in high elevation forests that are mostly often dominated by Engelmann spruce. And I just love spending time in those types of forests. I'm actually not a student. I am an employee of CSU. So I work for the Colorado State Forest Service, which is housed under the Warner College. And my role at the Colorado State Forest Service is a forest carbon specialist. So I was really intrigued when I saw this class being offered. We at the State Forest Service are really trying to figure out just new and innovative ways to help offset the cost of rising forest management and forest practices that need to be done across the state. And carbon markets could be one of those solutions. But I've kind of just been trying to keep tabs on everything that comes out in the news and the media, and it's very much like the Wild West in that space. And so just trying to get down to the facts of how can we make these markets more scientific and viable and sustainable for what we're trying to achieve. And yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you. Who else do we have on the line? Not seeing.
Hi, I am Abir Maimuni, and my favorite tree is banyan tree. It's a tree which is actually used for making bonsai. I mean, used largely, and this tree has so many roots. So it's looks good whenever it's. I mean, it's. Older than 100 years. And currently I'm studying in Impact MBA. And I was working in a sustainable finance department in a bank. So that actually leads me to know more in this area. And I will do my fellowship in Edelman Financial Engines, and on that job, I have to work on their scope 3 emission as well as their options of offsetting carbon. So that is actually why I am intrigued to take this course to learn more about it. Thanks.
Thank you. We have Adwait.
Yeah, I can. Hi, so I'm Advait. I am Impact MBA again. I'm doing my 4th semester, extra semester, and looking for courses which are around carbon management, carbon markets. And this course I found super useful from the description, so I'm intrigued by it. And my favorite tree is a coconut tree. Thanks.
Thank you. And then Annie.
Yeah, hi everyone. I don't know if you can see me, but hopefully you can hear me. I'm Annie Hawkinson. I just answered this question the other day for a conference. So I'll say my favorite tree is the Cayunia rami, which is a tree that grows in the Andes at high elevation. And I'm studying the Impact MBA as well. And I'm interested in this class. It, in general, aligns with the carbon management certificate I'm also pursuing with the MBA. But I have a natural resources background, and just I'm interested in conservation finance and the world of carbon crediting and biodiversity crediting. And I am taking like the series of 1 credits. And yeah, I mean, the more I learn about these things, the more complicated I realize it is. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. I think that's everyone. We lost our. Okay. Did we miss anyone? All right. Next up, just ways of working. And again, this is my first time teaching with you all or any class at CSU. So if there's anything I'm missing here, anything that you all normally cover in an intro session, please let me know. But just as a week recap, this will be every Monday, 4 through 6, excluding spring break, until the end of March. If you want to meet with me one-on-one, please shoot me an email. And then just as a class, what's the best way for us to stay in contact? Are the Canvas announcements helpful? Do you prefer if we set up an email list?
I like the announcements. I think those are helpful.
Okay, so you will track those?
Yeah.
And then I'd love to just hear from you all, some of the best ways that you've experienced working collaboratively in an online class like this, where some folks are in person, some folks are not. And just, what's worked well, what didn't. If anyone has any like preemptive feedback.
I think Canvas has a feature where you can set up like a discussion board. So for the online students to contribute that way, and then people can comment on each other's posts.
Okay.
I was going to suggest that too. You can just have an open discussion page, and like people can ask questions that are like frequently asked, or you can have like say, let's talk about this and whatever. But that's a really like universal way.
And you can set those up, or do I have to set those up?
I think everybody can, but
We can
Yeah.
play around with it. But that's good to know.
Is your question for like when we're here talking between 4 to 6 or at any point?
Both. Yeah, like what are the best ways that you've all like experienced both in the moment lectures and then kind of working? My hope is that you're going to do some group projects together and as the big course assignment. Have you done that in a remote context before? Has that worked well?
I don't have a lot of experience doing that in a remote context. But one example is last course with Lauren Gifford. She created like a Google Doc that everyone was contributing to. And that seemed to work pretty well. But in terms of like how we're all going to be interacting between 4 and 6 on Mondays, this will be the first time that I've been in like a hybrid setting like that. I don't know about other people.
Kaylin, you're not up. Nathan?
I was just gonna comment. I think there was on some of those group things, and I think some of this is other folks doing first attempts at this, but just making sure there's clear expectations on some of those online interaction things of like, because at first we sort of all did the same project in parallel, as opposed to being collaborative towards one final product. And so just making sure it's clear what the end product's supposed to look like, so we're all pulling in the same direction. That makes sense.
It does, yes, thank you. Awesome. And then the only other, and we can check in on this throughout just to make sure it's productive for you all. But the only other thing I wanted to cover was next week on the 10th, I will be at a conference, so I won't be able to do our normal time. And I was hoping that we could all align on a different time. I know, Ashley, you likely won't be able to do anything that week. But I can be flexible any other day that week, just not Monday. Would the best way to schedule with you all be to send out like a when to meet?
Yeah.
Okay, I can set that up and I guess send out the link in an announcement. And if you all don't mind contributing, and Ashley, I'll put some time for the following week too, just in case.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll be traveling to DC Monday after, well, sorry, my flight's on Tuesday. I'll be having to drive to Denver on Monday, and then I'm in a conference like all day, Wednesday, Thursday. My flight back to Colorado is on Friday midday. So it's kind of just all over the place. But I can see if there's any flexibility like late Tuesday evening, when I'm settled there, or maybe first thing the next week, perhaps. But yeah, that's kind of what my schedule looks like that week.
Okay, that's fine. We'll work it out. So we'll go with the time that works best for everyone.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Anything else before we get started? Okay. So just a little about me. So also, we have all of your faces up here on the screen. Can you see yourselves? Is it very awkward, or are you just seeing the slides?
Yeah, we can see us.
You can see you. Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, it's better. Yeah.
Okay. Whoa, sorry guys.
You could also do full screen on that tab.
Do you know how to do that?
The top right corner, little square.
This one?
One more above.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. So I'm a landscape scientist, not a computer scientist, as you can all see. And just to tell you a little bit, as I said, I'm really passionate about outlining paths for folks outside of academia. Right now I'm at Carbon Direct. What we are is a consultancy that works with organizations that are looking to set and meet climate targets. I lead the landscape decarbonization team, so this is anything that touches on natural and managed landscapes. And we help them set strategy for decarbonization. A lot of this involves looking at projects on the voluntary carbon market and evaluating whether or not they are in fact creating climate impact and minimizing harms for communities and ecosystems while they're doing that. So I really strongly believe that, we're going to talk a lot about nature-based systems in this class because that's what I know. If you have questions about engineered or hybrid solutions, I'm happy to point you to resources, but I won't be super technical. But I really strongly believe that we can't just talk about carbon. We have to talk about the patterns and processes that are underpinning ecosystem function to meet land management goals and plans that are a little more holistic in order to meet our climate goals. And because of that, these voluntary carbon markets that we're going to be talking about are really grounded in a combination of landscape management and assessing rigor and credibility for supporting people's economies and ecosystems. And I think, did you all see the assigned readings in the modules? Did you all do them? Oh, wow. Okay, cool. I have no way to check, so that's awesome. But I think we assigned the high quality criteria, correct? So this is something that my organization puts out annually with Microsoft, who's one of the, if not the biggest buyer of carbon removal credits in the market. Where we try to define what it looks like to have a scientifically rigorous project across a few different technical verticals. And we'll talk a little bit more about those in detail. But first, we're going to talk about Carbon Management 101. So I think you should all be familiar with the Paris Agreement, right?
Yes.
So thank you. If we want to meet our targets, and we're quickly approaching that point of no return where we will not, I guess 1.5 is basically out the window. But if we want to meet any climate targets, we can't just be reducing and avoiding emissions. We need to also be removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And this is where a lot of my work sits, is thinking about how we can be removing carbon credibly. That being said, any credible carbon management strategy is going to both first work to reduce emissions and then work to remove carbon from the atmosphere. Any questions about this? It sounds like most of you have been in some sort of introductory carbon management class. Yes. So this is just talking a little bit about the mitigation hierarchy. So generally, if you're an organization that's looking to develop a carbon management plan, what you're going to do first is you're going to measure your emissions. You're going to understand kind of what you're doing operationally, what energy you're using, what your purchased goods and services are generating if you want to get into scope 3, which more and more organizations are doing. And then you're going to set a baseline so that you understand how your emissions are changing through time and you can track your progress. Then you're going to prioritize reductions and avoidance. And then you might think about purchasing offsets for those hard to abate parts of your operational emissions footprint. And then you will report and comply with any policies and regulations. Any questions about that?
I have a question. Would you say that most businesses, large companies, try to take that reduction step before removal? Do they have to? Or could they just try to offset with the crediting market?
So it's strongly frowned upon. I would say most organizations, very little of this is happening in a compliance framework. If this is happening in a compliance framework, most of those require you to follow a mitigation hierarchy, like the one listed out here. And in those instances, you need to be able to show that you've done your footprint and you've identified your hotspots and you have a plan or a target. Companies that are engaging in a voluntary context, it's in their best interest to do the measurement first, because then they have a sense of what they do need to remove. And then again, they probably need to do at least a reduction plan, because if they don't have a reduction plan, they don't know how many offsets they should be purchasing through time. But whether or not those reductions are actually enforced is another question. Any other questions?
Yeah, are we getting this PowerPoint slide after class?
Sorry, ask that one more time.
Are we getting these slide decks after our classes?
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, I can give you all a version.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I was also going to request this. One thing being online helps is having the PDF of the file so I can take a screenshot of it and put it in my notes and in real time too. So let's say you slide up and I wasn't finished writing down a thing, then I can go check and make sure I get the right quote or whatever down. So it's really helpful to have that in real time when you're going through this.
Okay, thank you. I can do that. All right, so there are two key categories of carbon credits. So as I said, we're really going to focus on this section, this part of the mitigation hierarchy. So let's assume you're being a good actor, you're trying your best to reduce, but you still need to mitigate with some carbon credits. The categories where you're doing that are likely going to be avoidance and reduction or removals. Are you all familiar with these categories of carbon credits?
Yes. Yes.
Familiar, but I don't know what other people, it's still all very new to me. So any kind of review would be helpful.
Awesome. So by far the most abundant credits on the market today are avoidance and reduction. So these are going to be things like renewable energy credits, improved cook stoves, landfill methane capture, or reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, or RED. These credits are abundant in the marketplace. They're usually relatively low priced. However, they face a lot of scrutiny for good reason. The additionality is very difficult to demonstrate for these types of projects. And additionality is the concept of, would this intervention have occurred in the absence of carbon finance? So is this happening? Is this creating real and additional climate impact, or is this something that I would have done anyway under my business as usual scenario? And that counterfactual is especially hard to prove in instances of reduction avoidance and avoided deforestation, especially. So a lot of the press that we're seeing is especially related to red. But we're also seeing a lot of RECs press too. Any questions about avoided credits?
I was just gonna comment that at where I'm at work, we actually, because we sell a lot of renewable energy credits, that now, particularly with Microsoft, we have to make it so that they're greener credits by reducing project emissions. So there are some actors who will get sort of higher quality RECs than others.
Yes,
The market doesn't particularly care. It's more for their own bragging or, their own internal goals.
Yeah, and that's, to your point, I think that was Cody, Nathan? I don't know. Nathan, sorry, I can't see anyone. This is not to say that all avoidance credits are trash. This is to say that it is very difficult to find quality in this space, but they certainly exist out there. And that's part of why we're talking about risk and quality in this class, is to think about, what does quality look like and how can you identify it? The other class of credits that we see a lot, well, not as often on the market, is carbon dioxide removal, or CDR. And this can be classified as a deliberate human intervention where you're sequestering carbon dioxide or for a substantial duration of time. Ideally, this would be hundreds or thousands of years, but we're also seeing more abundantly shorter durations of time, so 20, 30, 50 years. You can think of those more as deferred emissions, and that's most of the nature-based space. So generally, we break CDR credits down into 3 categories. This is nature-based, so these are going to be things like planting new trees, improving the management of timber operations or non-timber forest products, or things like regenerative agriculture for soil organic carbon. We have hybrid solutions, so these are things like biomass with carbon removal and storage, or bikers. So this could be, I don't know if you guys have been reading about these wood burial projects, but that's an example of bikers. So is bioenergy with carbon capture or biochar. And then there's engineered CDR. So this is going to be things like direct air capture, mineralization, and a few others. So Carbon Cure, they're creating low carbon concrete. They're trapping CO2 that, when sourced properly, constitutes carbon removal. That's an example of an engineered carbon credit. These credits, the additionality, it's easier to prove the durability. You can make a strong case for it. But these projects tend to be more costly and a little more difficult to scale as compared to the avoidance projects. So it's a trade-off. Do you all have any questions about CDR? We're going to be spending a lot of time on CDR in this class.
I guess, can you talk a little bit more about, like, are there any standards as to the duration for CDR in climate-based solutions or natural working lands? Like, I've read things that certain projects have to have 40 years or a 40-year contract, others have a 100-year contract. Are there standards in place for any of it, or is it kind of up to the project that's
Was that
implementing
Ashley?
it?
Would you all mind saying your name to ask questions?
Yeah, it was me, Ashley.
Thanks. Yes, there are. Well, most projects on the market are registered with a registry and follow a specific methodology that's been certified under that registry. And those different methodologies have different what they call project crediting periods and then project periods. So the project period is the full duration that the project is running for, and you can also call that maybe the durability term. So in a lot of nature-based projects, you'll see a 30-year crediting period, where the reforestation activities will be generating carbon credits for 30 years, but then the project period will extend for another 25 or 30 years. So you'll have, a 50 or 60-year project period. And the different registries will have guidance as to how long that project period needs to be and how long the crediting period is. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those registries are and what the major ones are. There are 4 major registries on the market right now, and each one has, slightly different requirements with regards to durability and project term. And these come with different risks and considerations as well.
I actually heard a project like example, and it's kind of the way I think about this is you can go to a farmer and say, do this project, whatever, store carbon for like 10 years. And it's like a 10-year contract. And then in 10 years later, they'll like renew the contract or whatever. And it's like an iteration. So like you've guaranteed that this guy won't cut these trees down or whatever it is for that 10-year period. And then you reassess it later. Is that common practice? A good way to think about it?
Some protocols do allow that. If you're selling a 40-year durability credit to a buyer and you're telling them that that 40-year duration of carbon storage relies on the landowners re-upping every 5 or 10 years, that's a durability risk, right? So that's something that you probably want to call out as a quality concern from a buy-side perspective. And you'll have to balance that with the ecology, for lack of a better word, of the landowner, who might be unwilling to sign a contract that is longer than 3 to 5 years. So this is part of what we'll be talking about a lot in this class, is kind of laying out what is common practice in the industry, what are your buyers looking for? If you're selling a 40-year durability term, they probably want to see a 40-year contract, but is that reasonable in the context of row crop agriculture, for example? Potentially not. But these are good questions. These are things we should be thinking through.
I have a question too. I think this is really critical, right? Like durability, and we're talking about hundreds or 30, of years, and yet, like right now, carbon is being emitted, and if you were for a reforestation project, I want to be sequestering carbon and having it done in this way. I mean, a baby tree is going to not be sequestering a lot of carbon. It's going to take some time, right? So I'm kind of wondering about that balance of like the urgent need to have carbon be sequestered and the time it takes for the projects to really be sequestering the carbon.
We'll absolutely talk about that too. But that's why, if you're talking to a large buyer like Microsoft, for example, they're probably going to go for a diversified portfolio of credits. So, I'm going to keep leaning with NBS examples because I know them best. But to your point, if you're investing in an early stage ARR project, so this is a project where you're planting new trees or vegetation, you might take 3 to 5 years to start seeing credits come online because of the points that you just raised. But then you're going to get a very reliable, that will kind of rise and then asymptote for a while. So you're going to get very reliable tranches of delivery. If you're talking about improved forest management, those trees are already growing, so you can start generating credits immediately. And then you'll probably get a decline a little more quickly than with an ARR project. And you can start, some of these projects are mature, some of them are quite nascent, so you can start putting them together into a pretty coherent portfolio for a client that's de-risked by multiple geographies, project types, political contexts, and delivery timelines, or durability periods, depending on what it is that they're looking for. So we're not just thinking about the risks of the individual projects, but also how do we mitigate risk of non-delivery and true climate impact kind of across a broad portfolio if a buyer is looking to purchase large volumes. Any other questions on this? Great. And then we don't need to spend a lot of time here, but just so you're all aware, the carbon market, as we were speaking about earlier, is broadly split into voluntary markets and compliance markets. So compliance markets we're not going to be talking about in this class, except for right now. These are mandated through regulation, where you're setting a limit or cap on how much an industry, usually a heavy emitting industry, can emit, and then they can get tradable permits to buy credits under that scheme, and participation is compulsory. Removals are not that common in these markets, but they are starting to be considered in some regions like Japan, the EU, UK, and potentially Korea. And these are relatively large markets. They're generating like 950 billion in revenue. They're about 75 globally. And I'm just giving a couple examples down here. The voluntary carbon market, which is what we'll be spending our time in, is where you're seeing actors like private organizations and corporates purchasing credits from a variety of projects to meet their voluntary targets and commitments. Now, remember our earlier slide about the different types of credits. 96% of the credits that are traded on the VCM or voluntary carbon market are avoidance, with 4% representing removal. It is not regulated, although we are starting to see light guidance come out on what quality looks like. And it's about a $700 million, maybe $1 billion market size. There are 4 major registries. We'll talk about these again more later. These are Verra, Gold Standard, American Carbon Registry, or ACR, and Climate Action Reserve, or CARD. This is where most of the projects are sitting in terms of what methodologies they're following and where credits are being transacted. But there are, for engineered solutions, we're starting to see Puro, Earth, and there are a couple other pretty nascent registries that are coming online as well. Any questions about this slide? All right.
Can you tell me the differences between those voluntary registries like Verra, Gold Standard, American Carbon Registry? I mean, a basic difference. Is there any, or like just platform?
Yeah, it's each of them have slightly different requirements. Some of them cover a larger diversity of project types than others. So I don't want to go into all the differences right now because there are many. And I don't think it will serve you super well at present. But each of these registries has many methodologies that support many different project types. And each of those project types have different requirements for, say, durability term, or how things should be monitored or verified. So Climate Action Reserve, for example, requires most of their projects to have a 100-year durability term. Well, at least in the nature-based space, well, Vera might require things to be 30 for crediting period, and then they are a little more variable on project period. So you get variation on that front, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in detail because it's important. But I don't want to spend too much time on it right now.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
All right, so this is just to say that it is a very complex market ecosystem that is still working itself out. So because this is an unregulated market, there's just a lot of actors kind of floating around and inserting themselves into transactions. So you have those programs or offset schemes that we were talking about before. So Vera, Gold Standard, this is where the credits, these are the methodologies the credits are following. They're tracking issuance and retirement. They're the buyers. They're the brokers. So these are people who will look at a project, buy the credits, and then try to resell them with some sort of take rate. They're the market exchanges. They're investors who are getting these projects off the ground. They're the developers who are actually doing the projects, and then they're the third-party auditors. And there's a whole bunch of actors in between as well. So often developers won't work alone. They'll have a bunch of implementing partners. But all this to say that there's a lot going on to both generate the projects, to verify the projects, and then to get them sold. And then this is just kind of a spaghetti map to show you that, to your question earlier, there are a lot of standards and protocols out there. And it's just, each of them has different MMRV requirements, different durability terms. So it's not, I'm not going to go into each one. But you can see that there are a lot of different ways that you can be approaching project design based on these registry protocols. So this is kind of coming back to this idea of durability, where if we really want to be meeting our climate targets, the sequestered carbon dioxide should be stored securely for thousands of years. And standards that a lot of these buyers are aligned with, like SBTI, are asking that if you're going to be purchasing carbon credits, please make sure that they're permanent or, thousands of years of storage. If we're talking, as I said before, about 20, 30, 50-year durations, people generally think about them as temporary removals or deferred emissions, but those are really what are available today on the market and what are available at scale. And there are a couple ways that we can talk about later where you could maybe horizontally stock your purchases to have them be durable through time, and a little competitive in terms of durability as a quality. But we're starting to see a lot of, as more quality standards are coming out in, say, the EU and the UK, we're starting to see guidance point to like. So if you're going to, remove a fossil fuel that's been stored for thousands, millions of years, you should probably be purchasing a credit that will be storing carbon for an equivalent amount of time. So we're starting to see buyers more and more think about that. Any questions before I move on? Okay.
Technical question
Yes.
about a solution. Biochar this is like turning carbon into innate carbon. Would that be like a biological system that becomes geological and is like hundreds of years of storage with that, or is it more decadal timeline?
It depends on the deployment. You sometimes see geologic injection into like Class 6 wells or whatever with biochar, which would then be a very durable form of carbon solution. Other forms are going to be like hundreds, but it's definitely considered much more durable than a reforestation project.
Okay, yeah. Like what I've heard a lot about biochar is sprinkling it on agricultural fields to increase the soil carbon content, and so that would be like decadal to hundreds of years. But pumping it into the ground is obviously a lot as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, biochar. So biochar is interesting because you have both the biochar, which is like a product that can be sold to farmers, and then you have the syngas that comes out of the biochar process that can be injected or stored in a more permanent way. So the biochar business model, I think, depends on being able to sell the physical product as well as the carbon benefits. So you could potentially make an argument for carbon storage with the physical element, but much like compost, I think the issue there is that you're moving carbon from one place to another. So if you're storing like inorganic carbon in the soil with biochar, like maybe, but again, this is not my field, and we could be talking about slightly different solutions.
Yeah. Well, that answers the broad question. So thanks.
So as we've been talking about, we see CDR solutions fall broadly into 3 categories. The engineered, NBS, and hybrid, but we also see, we can think about them in terms of risk as well. And these are going to move from more nascent solutions that we just don't understand enough about. Maybe these are more R&D oriented. We can't really make claims against them. So things like macroalgae cultivation, advanced cultivars, ocean alkalinity enhancement, where you're scattering rock dust in the ocean. They're all good ideas, but they're really hard to monitor, or they're really hard to deploy at scale, or there's just some expensive discovery that still needs to happen. But we're starting to see these projects put forward kind of ambitious goals, which is quite exciting. They're just not quite ready to be transacted on the market yet. We have solutions where we think we're almost there, but we just need to increase confidence. Either, it's soil carbon, maybe we need to figure out how to fix confidence and durability with those contract life issues we were talking about. With engineered wood products, there's definitely some tracking and accounting that we need to figure out. Same with, green tree burial. How can we really be certain that there's not going to be a leak? And then we have technologies where we feel like these can be generating verifiable carbon credits, and we're still improving MMRV or other aspects. So these are ready, they're at scale, they're getting to scale on the market, they are being transacted, as are some of these other ones. But we think that they're ready to generate high quality credits. And these are going to be things like planting new trees, peatland and wetland restoration, improved forest management, direct air capture, biochar, and bioenergy with carbon capture.
Can I ask a question? So are each one of these like a type of credit? Like you would say like IFM credit, biochar credit?
That's correct, yeah. So each of these are a different technology type or project type that can generate a carbon credit. And some of these, I mean, I would say most of these are generating carbon credits on the voluntary market today. The way that I've categorized them here are just my expert understanding of which ones you can look to for quality and which ones still need a lot of work. Any other questions?
Is it for the engineered wood products, is it mostly like a more definitive like life cycle analysis that needs to be established for different products, like all the way to when it's retired into a landfill? Is that kind of like what needs to be established more, or are there other areas of research that need to be figured out first?
That's the major one is, you know, it's really hard to guarantee like what will happen to the product once it's sold also.
Yeah.
So if you want to assume that everything ends up in a landfill, you know, that might be a form of durable storage if you want to assume, but it's hard to track and verify, which makes the uncertainty deductions for those sorts of credits like wildly high if you want to like really credibly account for those uncertainties. And then it doesn't quite work out with the LCA if you want to have an enormous uncertainty deduction.
That makes sense.
All right, so as you all saw from the readings, quality is a big issue still on the voluntary carbon market. Although we do think that it has potential to scale climate mitigation. So, you know, part of these issues stem from the fact that it is self-regulated. These registries are tracking the projects themselves, issuing the credits themselves. They do have independent verifiers, but there's a little bit of a black box. As we were talking about, and as we'll get into more, these protocols and methodologies, there are many of them, and they are of mixed quality, and some of them can allow projects to overcredit, among other issues. So you really have to be careful about what protocol you're buying from. What I tell buyers is, regardless of protocol, you know, any project can be high quality, but we really think of the protocol as the quality floor. So what are they doing on top of that protocol to ensure credibility? And then finally, this should be no surprise to anyone, but these low quality credits, you know, are really undermining real climate action because they just create bad press, they create reputational risks. People are kind of leery of purchasing. And then we don't get movement. Okay, so that was our first section, Carbon Management 101. Any questions? Where we move into talking a little bit about risk assessment. All right. So because of all those issues, it's really important, as I said, to think about these protocols as the quality floor. And then we have to look at each project individually to assess its merits. So we're just going to kind of go through these 5 major points. Right now we have a low quality market. It's drawing scrutiny. These market structures are disaggregated, which makes that difficult. Nature-based removals, which are the shorter term ones and which are the ones we'll focus on, are going to remain dominant in the near term. And that's why we're going to talk about them. Also, that's what I know. And then we are expecting to see some high durability CDR technologies like DAC come down in price through 2030, but it's still going to be kind of a barrier to entry for a lot of buyers on the market. Okay, so we talked about this before, but about 96%, I guess this is from 2022, 2023, of the credits transacted on the market are avoidance and reduction, with a much smaller percentage coming from removal or kind of a mix mixture of the two. Most of the avoidance and reduction credits on the market are red and grid scale renewable energy projects. And I would say that of the removal projects on the market, or those mixed, like maybe 10% of what I see, I think are having real climate impact.
Of the
Of these, like
combined.
13%,
Oh, okay.
14%. So very small fraction. And I shared, some example articles with you, but what happens then is this, because we have so many low quality credits on the market, it gets a lot of scrutiny, which means that we get these leading corporate buyers starting to set their own standards for quality. So you saw that big kind of complicated market ecosystem slide. Most credits that are transacted on the carbon market today are verified by an independent third-party auditor. So this is an organization that will pay an employee or an expert to go to the site to actually look at whether the project is doing what it says it does, and then to write a verification report. And this will happen with these are called validation and verification bodies, or VVBs, and this will happen with some frequency during the project crediting period. We do not think this is sufficient to guarantee quality, because they're looking again at, is this project following the protocol? Not, is this project going above and beyond to actually create climate impact? And we can see, this is an example of how this kind of trickles out. So Vera, which is probably the largest registry, their CEO stepped down recently because of these very issues, where all the projects on Vera have to go through verification. It's insufficient. Any questions here?
I guess,
Yeah.
sorry, I have something.
Thanks, that's great.
So in addition to this verification not being sufficient, it also seems like it would just be really hard to do. I'm familiar, like I have firsthand experience with the Alto Mayo Peru work and the Guardian article that you shared. And like, I've been there and I've seen the tree nurseries, and this is a huge protected area, and there are a lot of different areas where the reforestation is occurring. I'm like, how would somebody go and assess the project? I don't know. It does seem very hard. So
It certainly is, yeah. And we'll talk a little bit. I mean, this is going to be what we'll do in this class, is we'll assess a project together.
Oh, cool.
You'll get a sense of what that feels like.
Okay. That's good to hear, because I just can't really picture it.
Yeah.
So,
This is
someone else has
Nate.
a question?
Yeah, it's Nate. I just had a quick question. I know you've sort of mentioned that sort of corporates are getting less confidence in these credits. I guess, have you found it that on the other side of things, that consumers have less faith in corporations making claims based off of carbon credits? Because I know, at least for me personally, if someone makes we're 100, we've offset all of our carbon, I take it with several grains of salt whenever I see those advertisements. I don't know if then corporates are sort of backing off, saying, well, this doesn't have any value because no one trusts us anyway. Or I guess.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, it really depends. So it depends on where these organizations are purchasing their offsets from, right? Because as you pointed out, not all of these projects are trash. Some of them are good. Some of them are creating real climate impact. Some of them are additional. And we really need them to be good and additional and creating climate impact. So it's kind of, it's a push-pull. Like we want corporates and organizations to be engaging and transacting. We want these projects to succeed. Most of them are not doing what we hope that they're doing. And I think that, consumers play a really important role in making it clear that we want this sort of activity, but we want it to be credible and we want it to be transparent. So I think, unfortunately, it puts a lot of the homework on the consumer. But is this company publishing where they're buying their offsets from? So Microsoft puts out a publication every year listing all the projects that they've purchased from, and you can go and check them out. That's a lot of work on you. But a lot of these organizations do the same. A lot of the registries have to name who's purchasing from them. So I'm not saying that you need to go do investigative reporting on all of your purchases, but I struggle with it too, because I want people to be, doing the right thing and being responsible and following the mitigation hierarchy. But I also think that none of this will work if it's not rigorous.
Cody here. My other class is this semester on climate communication and community engagement, and one of the big themes that's emerged for me this semester so far is trust in how the qualified people kind of break through to the lay person, the everyday man. And like one thing I'm thinking about all the time is like, what would a climate skeptic think about this? Okay, how do I phrase this or communicate this in a way that makes him, I guess, move up they call it the ladder of conservation, but like different steps along, like leaders and deniers, or and how do we build trust in the community? Like even me here today, like we're watching the John Oliver clip in prep for this class, and it's like, yeah, these carbon offset credits are kind of BS. Like, how do we build trust in these verification, certification, quality control, different measures to make this a viable solution?
Well, I am not a communications person, so I'll defer to you. But, hopefully the tools that we learn in this class together will convince you that there are ways to assess credibility for these projects in ways that give you confidence. And then I hope that, you can go out and use your superpowers to communicate what quality looks like.
Fair enough.
All right. So other thing that's really interesting is that these market structures are disaggregated. So you'll remember that complicated ecosystem slide again, which I should have flashed up again, I'm realizing. So what you're starting to see is buyers who care about quality. Last year in the voluntary carbon market, supply exceeded demand. So it looks like the market's not, quite functioning as it should. But if you take a closer look, you'll see that actually high quality carbon credits are very scarce. And there's a lot of demand for those, and it's very difficult to identify them. And so you start seeing a lot of companies that really care about quality and that want to report transparently, really scrambling to pick up these higher quality credits at higher costs. And what they're starting to do now is buy them all up in advance. So they'll ask a company like mine to take a look at a really early stage project and say, yeah, this is likely to generate high quality credits over the next 20 years. Here are a few risks that you can mitigate in your contracting process. And that organization will say, great, I'm going to sign a contract for 10 to 15 years and just buy up all of the incoming supply, or some portion of the incoming supply. And we're starting to see that more and more with some of the larger buyers, which is both good for those high quality developers, but also makes market entry for other consumers interested in purchasing quality difficult. The other, I think we've spoken about this a little bit, but today natural climate solutions or nature-based solutions are making up about 98% of the market, with hybrid and engineered making up 2%. We think that is going to change with, the IRA as it stands, and other regulation coming online in the EU, as well as guidance like SBTI asking for like. But nature-based solutions are going to remain dominant in the near term because that's what's available and that's what we can do reliably at scale today. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. And this is just kind of reiterating what I was saying about, I guess I should update this, but I'm too sad. So the other thing to think about for hybrid and engineered is that these are expensive. So while we're seeing large purchases on the market, they're driven by very few buyers, which is, good for those buyers, but risky for those developers. Okay, so this is taking us, all of this is leading up to what we'll be doing in this class, which is taking a critical look at projects to assess them for quality. So I think you all then read the high quality criteria. See nods, awesome. I'm gonna spin through the quality criteria quickly. But we're going to be spending a lot of time on these during the rest of the class. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I might keep the answer brief. So generally we break up, and this is a little old, I apologize. We updated our quality criteria in 24, consolidated a bit. But generally we can think about 2 kind of categories of quality. So there's carbon integrity. Is this representing a real reduction or removal? So 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide or equivalent removed from the atmosphere. And then harms, benefits, and justice. So is this produced in a non-harmful way to communities and the environment? And is it generating equitable benefits? We need all of these things to be true for it to be a high quality project. As I said at the start, these projects don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in communities. They exist in ecosystems. If we want these changes or these interventions to be sustainable, they need to be doing good, not just for the climate, but for communities and ecosystems. So these quality criteria are just as important as carbon integrity. So when we think about additionality and baselines, to get a little more granular, we're asking, is this project making a genuine climate impact against a counterfactual? So this is the idea of what would have happened in the absence of my intervention. We can think about this in 3 ways. For it to be additional, we want it to not be required by regulation. We want carbon finance to be driving the climate impact. So it doesn't mean that climate finance or carbon finance is the only contributor to the project, but it needs to be, we need to be able to show that carbon finance is contributing to the climate impact. And then, is it common practice? So is everyone around you doing this? Because if so, you were probably going to do it anyway. Now, that gets a little tricky. You could probably make arguments for, say, regenerative agriculture, that common practice isn't as valid because the startup costs to adopting a new practice are going to be real for individual farmers, no matter what their neighbors are doing. But by and large, we think about those 3 categories for additionality, and then we really want to be able to see that impact against a baseline. And in some cases, this baseline could be dynamic. So you can be tracking common practice, say through time, to make sure that the climate intervention or the climate impact is actually reflecting what's truly happening in real time in the area, rather than just kind of a static assumed line. This is appropriate in many improved forest management instances, for example. In some reforestation instances, it may not be quite as useful in agroforestry, but we can again get into that. Any questions about additionality and baselines before we talk about leakage? Okay, the project cannot cause leakage. Do you all know, did you talk about this with Lauren?
I don't recall, like I highlighted it in our readings because I thought additionality was tricky. And when I read leakage and like looked it up, I was like, oh, that sounds hard too. I don't know if I just remember.
Yeah. Anyone is familiar with this term? Maybe the impact MBA students?
Rich mentioned it in one of his classes last semester.
Yeah, like a bit basic or in brief.
Awesome. Yeah. So what we're doing with leakage is we're asking.
So leakage is like one farmer. If we are purchasing from one farmer for like afforestation purpose, whether he is like doing some agricultural projects in another field, so that might be a reason of leakage or might be a source of leakage. Is that so?
That's absolutely right. So we can think about leakage in kind of two contexts for these projects. The first is what you were saying, which would be activity leakage. So is this project kind of displacing, if I am reforesting an agricultural field, am I just going to go cut down a forest somewhere else to grow my crops? You're not really creating a climate impact there, right? You're just displacing the activity. So it's a little net neutral. Or we can talk about market leakage. So if I am doing IFM, so if I'm extending my rotation periods across all of Maine, like if I'm a big landowner in Maine and I'm just kind of changing this, how the market works in that area, am I causing another geography to increase production? Is kind of the market shifting because of my actions in one area? Or is this, this could apply internationally as well? That is really hard to analyze and predict, especially because many of these projects are quite small scale. But we do generally look for these projects to take some sort of leakage deduction. So just based on the activities that are being displaced or based on kind of what the intervention is asking the project to do, we can assume that some amount of leakage is happening, and we're just going to deduct a certain number of credits that are generated every year to kind of counterbalance that leakage, if you will. Now, there's some really good work by Barbara Haya at Berkeley, and maybe we'll read it, where she kind of looks at IFM or improved forest management projects in the context of the California cap and trade, and says that she thinks that leakage has been underestimated by like 80% in most of these projects. So it's really hard to do. I don't think anyone has a great handle on it, but activity leakage, you can usually predict with a little more certainty.
So my niche that I've studied here is greenhouse gas inventories, and Dr. Stephen Ogle is my advisor. And taking his class last year, this was a big part of like incorporating that in our calculations. And we just did a broad like 10 or 20% reduction in the expected carbon emissions that our project or whatever expected to reduce. But that's so, and then sorry, another question that kind of ties into this. I just wanted to share that there's something I've heard where like if you have a forest project, there's like a backup forest that's attached to this. So X% of the carbon credits go into this backup forest. So if the real forest carbon credits burn down, then you've got this backup forest that is still under the project, but isn't accounted for the actual credits that are accounted for in the initial sale. But if it does burn down, then they can use that as a backup. Am I right on that?
So I think what you're talking about is the buffer pool.
Yes.
And the way that that works is it's not a physical forest. That's kind of like a backup forest, although that would be awesome. It is similar to the leakage deduction that we were just talking about, where some percent of credits that you generate will go into a buffer pool, so that in the event of a reversal, like a fire or a pest outbreak, those credits might be able to cover the losses. Generally, the registries contribute buffer credits into kind of a common buffer pool so that reversals, but that means that when you are made whole from a reversal event, you can't kind of guarantee that you're getting credits from your same project's buffer pool, and you can't guarantee the quality of those other projects that you're getting credits from.
Thanks.
So monitoring, reporting, and verification. Now we say measurement in front of that, so it's MMRV. So this is asking, am I using the best available science or best practices to reliably, reproducibly, and transparently measure what is happening in my project through time? And then am I adhering to regulations and protocols to do that? Durability is how can I guarantee that the project will sequester carbon for the full project period. So for example, if we're worried that this is a project in a very fire-prone area and we're planting trees, what's the likelihood that it's going to burn down? Am I confident that I can purchase these credits? Similarly, am I worried that the landowner is going to change their mind? Maybe they're getting carbon credit payments for 25 years, for 30 years, but when those run out, they have to maintain the practice for 30 more years. Do I feel confident that they'll do that? What protections are in place? And then, we talked a lot about this at the start of this slide, but what are the safeguards in place for communities and ecosystems where these projects are being sited? Have stakeholders been engaged and mapped? Are we engaging in distributive and procedural equity? Have we evaluated land tenure? Do we understand, who owns the carbon rights? Are there regulations about benefit sharing in the region? Are they being followed? Are the benefit sharing equitable? Have communities been consulted about what they want? So this is kind of what we look at in that area. Also, are we using pesticides that are banned? Do we think that there are invasive species that are being deployed? All of these things we want to know. Any questions about these quality criteria?
Could you explain in a little more detail what you mean by carbon rights? Like, if you can help it.
Yeah, so much like mineral or oil rights, it's not guaranteed that a landowner will own the carbon generated through a carbon project. So you just want to understand who is legally responsible for the carbon and who is legally able to transact it and receive benefits. So I know we are getting a lot of questions about standards. Unless, are there any other questions about quality criteria? So there are so many standards out there. I think you all saw the spaghetti map. We're not going to go into all of them in detail, but because these standards are so inconsistent, they lead to false equivalencies across the same criteria, which leads to low credibility and low quality and kind of weakens the market writ large. So here's just an example of durability in a few different standards. And you can see that it's wildly variable. Mernori, which is no longer in business, asks that carbon be stored for 10 years. San Vivo, you get 20 to 40. Puro Earth, 20 or 50. CAR, 100. Vera, it actually should be like 40 to 100 plus, but essentially like this is all over the place, but you're still seeing credits, they're differentiated by price, which is just kind of the cost of getting a project up and off the ground. But fundamentally, we treat carbon credits as fungible units of exchange. And this is just kind of showing that underneath the hood, that is not at all the case. And then, of course, you know, policy plays an enormous influence on who is doing what and why, and what sorts of practices are going to be incentivized and who is going to get payment for what. So this is an example of clean fuels credits or low carbon fuel standard credits. Is anyone familiar with these? So this is another, you know, voluntary market where you can buy low carbon fuel credits. You can get great tax credits for them too. But the ethanol, and most of them are bioethanol. The ethanol producers are the ones that get the credits because they are reducing their emissions during their production process.
Sorry, who is the one that gets credits?
The ethanol producers. And those are that's the only part of the value chain where you can see reductions happening. There's no way to incentivize farmers under LCFS to adopt regenerative practices and get kind of a share of the credit by, you know, reducing the carbon intensity of the biofuel. So the LCA doesn't allow for that. So just kind of thinking about, I know we're not going to look at LCFS in this class, but I think it's a good example of how kind of the way that the policy is structured does or does not incentivize regenerative practices or maximize opportunities for climate impact. Where like there's a really big opportunity to say, hey, farmers, do you want to adopt regenerative practices? You know, most of them are selling into clean fuels markets anyway. So why not do this and get a cut of a credit? But there's no mechanism for them to do that right now. Okay, so I'm gonna skip this one. I might just run. Yeah. If anyone ever needs a bio break, just go. Don't worry about it. So just to sum it all up, we're always, you know, if we're talking about putting together a carbon management strategy, we're always going to ask the organization to follow the mitigation hierarchy where they're measuring, they're prioritizing reductions, and then they're thinking about offsetting before reporting and complying. And then, you know, buying these offsets is going to depend on understanding what it is that you're looking for, putting together a really clear transaction goal that thinks not only about quality of the individual projects, but quality and delivery timeline kind of across your portfolio. So what we'll be doing in this class is looking at different projects and different protocols and saying, like, based on what the protocol is asking for, is this project in compliance? Based on our understanding of quality, is this project likely to have climate impact? So here's a figure from a paper that some colleagues of mine put together that look at common improved forest management protocols and ask, if we're talking about carbon accounting, how are different carbon pools included or excluded across these different protocols? And you'll see, much like the durability figure that we looked at earlier, that it's quite variable. So when we're looking at the projects that we're going to look at during this course, we'll need to use our best judgment about what is and is not in bounds and in quality. And what we'll be doing in this class is this is an example, we're not going to look at this project, but we're going to choose a project as a class. I will bring a couple candidates in our next session, and I'd like us to kind of discuss them and then decide what we'd like to focus on. And then we will analyze it in detail against those quality criteria. So you'll be going into the project documentation. We'll spend each class kind of highlighting a different NBS project type. And then we'll spend for the first half, and then we'll spend the last half of the class kind of talking through carbon accounting, leakage, community harms and benefits of the project that we're analyzing as a group. And then kind of come to our own conclusions. Any questions? Okay. What that's going to look like at the end of the day is something like this. So, we talked about an example where we have these 5-year farmer contracts for regenerative practices, but we're trying to sell a 100-year project protocol durability term. So if we were assessing this project, we would probably say that the risk of farmer attrition, the risk of occurrence of a durability event is quite high. And the severity of the outcome would also be quite high. Because if we're doing conservative accounting, if we're thinking about this from a buyer perspective, if a farmer is not in the program, if there aren't kind of protections against attrition or kind of replacing that farmer, we can't assume that durability term will actually be realized. So we would call this a high risk. Similarly, in that same project, if the advertised storage rates per acre and payments aren't aligning with what's actually measured or modeled, farmers aren't receiving what they signed up to receive or what they thought they were going to get. So again, you're seeing that people might be signing up based on spurious data and might leave or experience financial hardship. So, again, we would probably class this as a high risk for a potential buyer. So this is the sort of exercise that we will be doing, looking at a project together across all of the quality criteria. Any questions?
After in this course, will it be teach about the thing is that how practically these things are happening. Like if I have a company, if I want to purchase some carbon credit, whom to approach, what are the organizations and what are the rates of, if the rate varies according to the projects or something like that.
So practically how to transact on the carbon market?
Yeah, exactly.
No, that was not an intended learning from the class, but we can absolutely talk about it.
Good.
Any other questions about the sorts of risk assessments that we'll be doing? And then this is just reminding you that we will be looking at all of these quality criteria. So I think, based on, we'll get to know each other a little better during the class, but based on what I'm hearing, what I think that we'll do is maybe choose one project and look at it together as a group and break you up into smaller groups where each group owns one of these quality criteria and reports out to the class on their finding, because it seems like each of you have different expertise and familiarity. And I think that might be a good way to approach it. But if you would all prefer to look at every criteria, we could think of other ways as well. And you don't have to decide now, but that's just kind of my thoughts. And that was my last slide. So I'm going to stop sharing. And then I'm going to find you all again on the screen. Okay. Awesome. Does anyone have any questions about what we just went over? Seeing those. Okay. Let me just pull up my syllabus. I know that we missed a class. So I'd love your thoughts on what we want to skip. So the next, if we were doing every class, the way that it would work is the next class we would talk a little bit more about the quality criteria. We would go into some examples, and then we would look at maybe 2 to 3 candidate projects that we could choose as a class to assess and talk through which one we want to do. Following that, I think we would again break you into small groups. This is the other kind of participation component. And each group would be responsible for presenting for 10 to 15 minutes at the start of class on a case study. So we would do an IFM case study for one class, we could do an agroforestry case study in another, and then a reforestation case study in the third and final. I know we've missed a class, so happy to rejigger that a little, but it's totally at your discretion which one of those you want to lose, or if we want to try to combine 2 of them. But I will open it up for discussion.
Yeah, I think combining might be good because yeah, we can go through everything.
My understanding was that we were going to just add a week to the end of this and not miss a week based on what Rich said in that email.
Yeah, that might be great if we can manage time. I mean, I don't know about Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a very open schedule, so I can do whatever.
Would someone mind forwarding it to me? And I can confirm with Rich. My understanding was that we were just missing a class, but we will get clarity on that point. Why don't we plan as though we were missing a class? And if we hear otherwise from Rich, we'll just follow the schedule as planned. But let's assume that we're missing one.
He said, this won't compress expectations work or extend beyond the already scheduled block. So yeah, we can confirm, but it sounds like
we're ending on the 6th, on the 31st. Yeah. Okay. That's my interpretation, hearing that to you.
Okay. I mean, whatever. Yeah.
I'm also happy to do the class twice in a week if that works with people's schedules, but I'm also not the one having to do the lecture. So,
unfortunately, I have a full-time job outside of this, so I'm not sure I could do 2 comfortably in a week. But why don't we see if we're feeling like we're really getting everything that we need to get done? And maybe we can revisit at the end of next class. So I'm wondering, do we want to consider putting maybe the reforestation case study, having someone present on that or IFM in our next lecture?
Like a group?
Yeah, so I think, how many of us are there? There are 8 of us. And we're gonna do, yeah, we could do groups of 2, 1 group of 3 for presentations. And I think what I'll do is I will send you some literature. And if you could, and the whole class will be responsible for reading it, but you will be responsible for kind of defining the discussion topics and synthesizing what it is that we learned and kind of reading back to the class what the general findings are on the technology type. What is it? How does it work? What are its risks? What are its opportunities? Where is it now? And maybe dive a little bit into the case study itself.
Would you
Yeah,
want?
I can do that. For,
Oh, I was gonna ask if you would have us create like PowerPoint slides and that kind of thing as well, or just more like leading a discussion.
I would prefer you to just lead a discussion. I don't think anyone should put themselves out and make PowerPoint slides unless it's easier for you to talk that way. But I'm hoping it will be just kind of open discussion. I will send out more. I hadn't anticipated doing this next class, but I'm realizing that probably we should, but I'll send out more concrete guidance on what that should look like. But I think what the expectations are that you would develop kind of the discussion points in the agenda, and then set the stage, as I just said. So what is it? Where is it? What are its risks? What are its opportunities? And we'll talk through a case study. You won't be expected to just lecture, but you will be expected to provide synthesis and bring in others to discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And I would ask those of you who are not preparing to lead the discussion to come prepared with 2 or 3 questions. So you can contribute to the discussion.
So each group would be doing a section of one of the points of the criteria, the quality criteria, or
that will be, sorry, the other group project.
Oh,
but this
okay,
is just, would someone like to own improved forest management? Would 2 or 3 people like to own improved forest management and come kind of lead a discussion about what that is?
Oh, I see. Okay.
yeah, I can do that. I don't know if anyone else wants to for next week.
We'll need 1 other volunteer. I think, Ashley, let's not have you do IFM because you probably do that all the time.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to attend next week, but yeah, I wouldn't volunteer myself for that one yet.
I could join IFM. This is Annie here, so Nathan, I could join with you.
Perfect.
Okay, I'll put my email in the chat just so we can sort of connect after the class.
And you'll send out a poll for next week too, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
A poll.
Like a dual poller.
Oh, yes,
for
yes,
the-
so when to meet. Yes.
When
thank
to
you.
meet, yeah.
Okay. I will do that. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so we have Nate and Annie on for IFM next week. Everyone will come prepared with 3 questions. I will send out a when to meet. And then we will also pick the projects that we're going to review as a class next week, just so I can get a sense of interest lie as I'm trying to think of the most appropriate projects. Based on what you've heard in this class and what you know of carbon projects outside of this class, what project types resonate most with this group?
I personally have a lot of interest in soil-related projects.
Okay. So organic carbon in like row crop agriculture or in grass, in kind of grazing systems?
Yeah, and like regenerative agriculture with like row crops.
Okay, awesome. Anyone else?
One thing that I am definitely more on the inclined to whatever is the technology side, and like pairing that with, you know, agriculture or whatever, like having solar farms above crops that solar, there's a term for it, I can't think of it.
Agrivoltaics.
Agrivoltaics, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested
I think
in
that's
that
a really
too.
cool project. But
Awesome.
technology related things, there's like concrete that sequester CO2 at the same time, you know, things like that are really interesting to me.
One thing we could
something like,
consider. Oh, go on, Nate.
okay, I was just gonna say, green concrete's probably also an area of interest for me, just because I'm gonna be doing a lot of supply chain stuff over the next 6 to 12 months, and that's one of the things we can control is what concrete we buy, versus what steel you buy is a little trickier, or where you buy your solar panels.
Okay, this is interesting. So we have soil carbon, we have engineered. One thing we could do, if folks have kind of divergent interests, is we could consider 2 projects and just have kind of two groups, which would be totally fine. So I could see one group, you know, Cody, Nate, Neelan, based on what you just said, you know, maybe enhanced rock weathering in croplands would be a really good project type for you all to take on for your in-depth review, because that is going to take elements of everything that you just said was interesting, although it's a little more inorganic based when it comes to the soil carbon, but still potentially interesting.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Is
definitely
anyone
a long-term solution.
Potentially, it potentially is, yeah. Is anyone interested in agroforestry, reforestation, improved forest management?
I'm definitely interested in reforestation and improved forest management to a degree, but I'm also interested in like I think you mentioned the class 6 wells and like plugging wells with either biochar, bio oil, and some of those more engineered products. I'd be interested in those, but definitely reforestation, especially in the face of, you know, big mega fires and post-fire disturbance recovery.
Okay, awesome. Yeah,
I'm interested in reforestation as well. Also, if there were any examples on like the dynamic between the global north and south and how a lot of reforestation projects happen in the global south and how communities are involved or impacted, I'm interested in that. But I'm also really open, and the other ideas were interesting to me as well.
okay, awesome. I'm wondering, so maybe we'll all present a couple options, so we could definitely keep the door open to having 2. What I'll do is I'll bring an enhanced rock weathering project. Maybe the engineered ones are a little tricky because the documentation, what I want you all to do is look at the actual project documentation and dive into it and see what you think of the project quality based on what they say that they're doing. Some of the registry protocols require that you post all of your documentation on the registry. A lot of the engineered ones don't, or they're following their own protocols. So I won't be able to get you the documentation for quite a few of them, quite a few of the ones that you just said you're interested in. But I think I might be able to get ERW, maybe. I can definitely get soil organic carbon. We could look at like improved forest management in Mexico would meet a lot of the points that you just brought up. So let me think about that a little, about what's available and what we could look at based on what you just said.
Yeah, and at least for me, this is very sort of an odd thing of I'm have an interest in forest management from the perspective of we often cut down forests to make solar farms, and figuring out how much of a debt I've made that I need to make up with other offsets. But that's maybe a little bit outside the scope.
Well, maybe you'll have the tools to assess that following this class. Awesome. Well, I think if no one has any other comments or questions, I can let us go about 6 minutes early. This class was recorded for Danny, who could not attend. So I'm going to figure out how to put that up somewhere. So Ashley, that might be another option for you next week.
Yeah, that would be amazing if I can watch a recording.
Awesome.
There may be 10 minutes of me sitting in the room at the beginning. I wanted to make sure I didn't have IT issues.
Oh, and I guess the last question for this group is, I'm happy, I'd really prefer, to the extent possible, that you come during the class time, because it, as I said, it is so, presentation based and group based. But that being said, I recognize that a lot of you are not located here. So if you prefer to do it all synchronously but remote, I'm happy to do that as well.
I think it's great to have an in-person vibe as much as possible. So I also just sent a message on LinkedIn to connect with everybody in the class. So I think that's a good thing that we should all do. But yeah. Would
you be coming in, Cody?
No, I'm in Winter Park, Colorado, but like having this time that like I don't know, agree with you that being in person as much as possible in this space is good. So
thank you. Is anyone on the call able to come in?
Maybe.
Yeah. I'll be able to join next time onwards. That's right.
Okay. And you two would continue.
Maybe.
It depends on, I guess.
I will have to do next week fully remote, I guess, with the other wrinkle here.
Even if we reschedule.
Yeah,
next week,
I
maybe
may
remote.
be in Francisco.
Okay. Beyond
I
that.
have I can join like after 4 classes because our Ramadan is going on. So like if that time is like just in a moment it will start. So I cannot like come during this month.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me think about that because it might not be worth it to ask Lauren to reserve the room for us. But it is lovely to see people. All right, I'll let you all go, but thank you so much for coming. I hope that my first ever lecture was not terrible.
It was great.
it was great.
It was fishing.
Would we be able to get a copy of the slides before next week's lecture as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I can put those up in the module. Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.